The third traveler that we are going to talk about is Francis Bernier. Francis Bernier, a Frenchman, was a doctor, political philosopher, and historian. Like many others, he came to Mughal Empire in search of opportunities. He was in India for 12 years, from 1656 to 1668, and was closely associated with the Mughal court as a physician to Prince Dara Shikoh, the eldest son of Emperor Shah Jahan. Bernier traveled to several parts of the country and wrote accounts on what he saw, frequently comparing what he saw in India with the situation in Europe. Francis Bernier belonged to a different intellectual tradition, preoccupied with comparing and contrasting what he saw in India in particular with that of Europe. His aim was to influence the policymakers to ensure that they make the right decision. Bernier's book Travels in the Mughal India is marked by detailed observation, critical insights, and reflection. His account contains discussions trying to place the history of Mughal within some of the universal framework. He constantly compared Mughal India with contemporary Europe, generally emphasizing the superiority of the European nations. His representation of Indian work on the model of binary opposition, where India is presented as the inverse of Europe. He also ordered the perceived differences hierarchically so that India appeared to be inferior to the Western world. According to Bernier, one of the fundamental differences between Mughal India and Europe was the lack of private property in land in the former. There was a firm difference in that, and he believed that the virtues of private property and says that Mughal emperor owned all the land and distributed it among his nobles, and that had disastrous consequences for the economy and society. Owing to crown ownership of land, argued Bernier, landholders could not pass on their land to their children, so they were averse to any long term investment in the sustenance and expansion of the production. Absence of property in land denied the emergence of improving landlords to maintain or improve lands. According to him, this led to the uniform ruination of agriculture and led to oppression of the peasantry. It declined them the proper living standards. Bernier said that the masses of India were undifferentiated and impoverished, subjugated by a small minority of a very rich and powerful ruling class. Between the poorest of the poor and the richest of the rich, there was no social group or class worth the name. Bernier confidently asserted that there is no middle state in India. This then is how Bernier saw the Mughal Empire. Its king was the king of beggars and barbarians. Its cities and towns were ruined and contaminated with ill air, and its fields overspread with bushes and full of pedestral marshes. And all this was because of one reason: crown ownership of the land. But none of the Mughal official document suggested that the state was the sole owner of the land. For instance, Abul Fazl, the 16th century official chronicle of Akbar's reign, described the land revenue as remuneration of sovereignty, a claim made by the ruler on his subjects for the protection he provided rather than as a rent on the land that is owned. It is possible that European travelers regarded such claim as rent because land revenues demand were often high. Bernier's description influenced Western theorists from the 18th century onwards. The French philosopher Montesquieu, for instance, used his account to develop the idea of Oriental despotism, according to which rulers in India have absolute authority over their subjects who kept them in condition of subjugation and poverty, arguing that all land belonged to the king and that private property was non existential. The idea was further developed as the concept of the Asiatic mode of production by Karl Marx in the 19th century. He argued that in India, before colonialism, surplus was appropriated by the state. This led to the emergence of society that was composed of a large number of autonomous egalitarian village communities. The imperial courts presided over these village communities, respecting their autonomy as long as the flow of surplus was impeded. Therefore, the system was a stagnant system and there was no development in the Indian economy during that time. While Bernier's preoccupation with projecting the Mughal state as tyrannical is obvious, his description occasionally hints at a more complex social reality. For instance, he felt that artisans had no incentive to improve the quality of their manufactures since profit were appropriated by the state. Manufacturers were consequently elsewhere in decline. At the same time, he considered that vast quantities of world's precious metals flowed into India as manufacturers were exported in exchange for gold and silver. He also noticed that the existence of a prosperous merchant community engaged in the long distance trades. In fact, during the 17th century, about 15% of the population lived in towns. This was on average higher than the proportion of urban population in Western Europe in the same period. In spite of this, Bernier described Mughal cities as camp towns, by which he meant towns that owed their existence and dependent for their survival on the imperial camp. He believed that these came into existence when the imperial court moved and rapidly declined when it moved out. As in case of question of land ownership, Bernier was drawing an oversimplified picture. There were other kinds of towns that existed in India as well, like manufacturing towns, trading towns, port towns, etc. Merchants often had strong community or kin ties and were organized into their own caste cum occupational bodies. In Western India, these groups were called Mahajans and their chief was called Seth. Other urban groups included professionals such as physicians, lawyers, painters, architects, musicians, calligraphers, etc. While some depended on imperial patronage, many made their living by serving other patrons. Apart from it, travelers who left written accounts were generally men who were interested in and sometimes intrigued by the condition of women in subcontinent. Sometimes they took social inequalities for granted as a natural state of affairs. For instance, slaves were openly sold in market like any other commodity and were regularly exchanged as gifts as noted by Ibn Battuta. It appears from Ibn Battuta's account that there was considerable differentiation among slaves. Some female slaves were in the service of the sultans who were experts in music and dance, and Ibn Battuta also enjoyed their performances at the wedding of sultan's sisters. Female slaves were also employed by the sultans to keep a watch on his nobles. Slaves were generally also used for domestic labor, and Ibn Battuta found their service particularly important for carrying women and men on the palanquins or the doli. The price of slaves, particularly female slaves required for domestic labor, was very low, so most families could afford to do so and keep at least one or two slaves. Contemporary European travelers and writers often highlighted the treatment of women as a crucial marker or difference between Western and Eastern societies. Not surprisingly, Bernier chose the practice of sati for detailed description. He noted that while some women seemed to embrace death cheerfully, others were forced to die after the death of their husband. Women's lives not only revolved around sati but were crucial in both agrarian and non agrarian production. They even participated in the commercial activities, sometimes even taking mercantile disputes to the court of law. It therefore seems unlikely that women were confined to the private spaces of their homes during the medieval Indian time.